everyone. Thanks for joining us again at the Roundtable with Peadbo. I have another really special guest here with us who has been an avid Peadbo advocate for since pretty much the inception of Peadbo. As I'll let him introduce himself first. Excuse me, after I just do my intro and just remind folks who are not familiar with Peadbo. Peadbo is a platform to help build and sustain your connections. And so Peadbo actually stands for Personal Advisory Board. And folks who are in your personal advisory board could be mentor, sponsor, family, anybody who just is a huge advocate and champion for your success and growth in your personal and professional journey. So with that being said, I'll let Yinka introduce himself and share a little bit about his connection with people, what he's been doing, and yeah, I'll let you go ahead.
Awesome. I love it. Well, hey, thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited. And like you said, right, I've been with Peadbo for a while now. I'm not too sure when Peadbo established, but yeah, for me, right, I've been a part of Peadbo for a little over a year now. I want to say it was March of 24, so now
Wow.
it's May of 25. And I actually came across Peadbo through one of the conferences that I attend relatively regularly. It's called the National Society of Black Engineers. There was a conference in Atlanta, Georgia in March of 2024. And I actually went with the company I currently work at, Pfizer. I am just kind of touch a little bit on that, and I'll kind of circle back to Pfizer or to Peadbo. Currently, I am a procurement business engagement professional at Pfizer. I've been in this role, got the promotion for this role about 2 months ago. But previously, I was in what's called a rotational development program, rotational development engineering program, RDE. And essentially, as RDEs, we had the opportunity to rotate to three different business units of our site in McPherson, Kansas, where I currently reside. Three different times, 8 months in its totality of
Wow.
each rotation. So we had 24 months for the full program, so 2 years, and again, three 8 month
Wow.
rotations. But in that RDE program, interestingly enough, this is the reason I bring that up. In that RDE program, we had opportunities to develop, right? And hence the development program. And so develop and grow, and it's kind of like an incubator, if you will. And there was there's these conferences that come up, whether it's engineering focus, whether it's you know um, Black engineering focused, you name it, women engineering focused, right? And when they come up, we as Pfizer have the opportunity to go and attend and recruit and develop. So because I was heavy in NESB back in school, I was the events lead. Shout out NESB at the University of Akron. Go Zips!
Yes, that's
For those who know,
me.
yeah, University of Akron. And so I asked my manager at the time. Well, actually, no. Let's take that back. It wasn't even my manager. It was but shout out my manager. It was I was a part of, and I'm still a part of, a colleague resource group at our site, or at Pfizer as a whole, called Global Black Community (GBC). CRGs are awesome, and we got to use our budget to fund our CRG members to go. And so
Mm.
me, as well as I think 4 or 5 other members at our site, and then a bunch of other members at other sites for GBC CRGs, got to be sent to this conference in, again, Atlanta. And it was going to this conference. Personally, I'm a big planner and all these different things. So I like to see all these different keynotes and all the different events that go on. And because I already have a job, right? I'm not necessarily looking for a job, but I have the opportunity to recruit. But majority of the time, right, I got to be able to go to these keynotes. And so on this agenda, I got to see one of the keynotes said something like, I was like, Peadbo? I don't know what that means, but it says,
Mhm.
the description was like, essentially a platform to be able to bring all your mentors together and be able to sustainably do that. And so I was like, at the time I have all these different mentors, which I do, and I'll talk about this in a second. I have all these different mentors, and if I'm able to bring them all together, I'm looking forward to be like Thanos, right? Where I have all the gems or all the whatever on my hand, and be like this,
You
and
got
be
the
inevitable.
power.
Got the
Right.
power. And so, yeah, that's when I went to the keynote, got to meet Keith himself, got to ask very intentional questions. And yeah, interestingly enough, for the 1 year after the conference, he actually granted all the attendees of that keynote 1 year free access to Peadbo. And you better believe I took advantage of that. And I don't know about all the other members, but for me, right, I'm sure it's still a little nerve wracking, but to get all these, mentors on, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. I'm going to take advantage of the fact that it's free. It's a great platform. Even if it wasn't free, I'd pay for it. Absolutely. Um, and yeah, I hit the ground running. I knew who I wanted. I acquired all of them. And it didn't take long where, probably within a month or two, I had my first people meeting. and we were
Wow.
going. So yeah.
Thank you for that full circle, just journey that you've experienced, just using Peadbo and connecting with your mentors and just those folks who are important to you, who have supported you throughout your professional journey and maybe even your personal. So, yeah, so I'm just so happy to have you here because that was really insightful and just showcasing exactly like why Peebo was built, right? And so, with that being said, I want to ask you a question. So, personally, like, who makes up your personal advisory board? And you kind of mentioned a few folks that came from maybe when you were in school, maybe in your professional journey, like your manager. So shout outs to your Pfizer manager. Um, but who makes up your personal advisory board?
Sure.
And can you share a little bit of a pivotal moment when their guidance helped you navigate your career, any career challenges you experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably unconventionally, my board has about nine, no, not about, has nine
Wow.
mentors, right?
Wow.
And I knew from the jump, right, that would be a little bit tough because that's nine different schedules, nine different families, right? Successful stories. But I wanted to put myself out there and challenge myself, and I wanted to
Mm,
center my people around the framework that I developed called ACE, the ACE framework. It's a abbreviation, an acronym, if you will, rather. Um, it stands for anchors, challengers, and experts. So my ACE pivot board. And so of the nine, right, my three, so it's three of each, right? My three anchors, Sho Baraka. If you guys don't know Sho Baraka, he's actually if you guys are familiar with like Lecrae, like a Christian rapper, you got to work with Lecrae back in the day, Christian rapper himself, Sho Baraka. So
mhm.
awesome guy. He's one of my anchors, like spiritual anchors. That's what an
Wow.
anchor means.
Wow.
Torian Scott. Interestingly enough, I actually met Torian Scott through one of my other mentors I'll mention a little bit later, but Torian Scott out in California. He's awesome. Show Brock, I believe, is in Atlanta himself. Torian Scott, again, another anchor. Lordly Beard, he's out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I actually met Lordly Beard through my time at Transformation Church. You may or may not know Transformation Church. I attended Transformation Church for a while, for about a year and a half in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? Pastor Michael Todd out there, awesome church. And I met Lordly Beard there as one of my mentors as an anchor. And then now we transition over to the challengers. So challengers, one of them being Arthur Edge. And at the time of recording, I'm actually going to be attending his wedding here starting tomorrow, actually traveling out to Maryland. And actually, I met Arthur through Nesby when I was back in college through like one of their virtual conferences online when it was COVID time. Arthur knows the story, super funny story how I met him. But Arthur is really one of those guys that really like started professionally and got like really tight, almost like the Paul to my Timothy, if you will, if you're
Mhm.
familiar with Paul and Timothy in the Bible. But Arthur is awesome. Javon Langford, he actually introduced me to Torian, but Javon Langford, interestingly enough, I met him through LinkedIn, right? And it was a time, I think he's probably one of my oldest mentors. Through one of my summers in college, I remember I had this idea to create a group that was like, and I wanted to create a group that was centered around like men who I'm close with, who can travel the world and mentor other young men, whether, we send out
Mhm.
applications and high school young men can, send in their application. And then for the summer, they roll with us, me and my six men. Again, this is all fictitious, just a thought. And they'd roll
Yeah.
around like around the,
It's a good thought though. Like that
right?
sounds amazing.
I know, right? And then they would roll around with us and we can like teach them about like, faith, finances, family. Like just, I had all these like F's. It was just interesting.
Mhm.
I don't have that anymore, but this is what I had back in the day. And I'm like, you know what? If I would have this group, I would call it the mentors,
Mm,
Mentours, the mentors,
I
right? And
like that.
it'd be a play on words. And I'm like, let me Google this because there's no way there's something like this doesn't exist already. I Googled that and something like that already exists, not to that degree, but with that name. And I'm like, who's the CEO of that? Javon Langford. Let me DM this guy on LinkedIn. Let me pick his mind. Let me pick his brain. DM'd him. He got back to me, and ever since then we've been just running together. And not to have that vision, but I think that vision came to me so I can really meet this mentor. And
Mm,
he is awesome. And so he's one of my challengers, right? And like challengers, you tell them things and you ask them things and they tell you things you don't want to hear, but ultimately because it's out of love. So Javon Langford is awesome. Dr. Sheldon Rice, my last challenger, interestingly enough, he was one of my advisors in college through this group called Collegiate 100. If you guys are familiar with that group, it's like a great group centered around young Black men in college, really focusing on excellence, again, for young collegiate Black men. So,
mm,
advisor in that, Dr. Sheldon Rice, shout out to you. And then now my last set is the so ACE, right? you have the experts. So this is where you're going to have industry experts, whether it's in tech, whether it's in pharma. And so here, Philip Steele, he I believe is my oldest mentor. At the time, he used to work at Apple when I was in school, and he was a graduate of my alma mater. And I remember talking to him because I was so flabbergasted with his role. I wanted to work at Apple when I was younger,
Mm-hmm.
but bigger than the role, he was just an amazing role model, right? With his wife, with his child. I think now he has two children. He's out in California still currently, works at a different company now, but still a killer nonetheless. So Philip Steele, Adrian Bailey. Adrian Bailey is actually one of my mentors, yes, but one of my kind of Pfizer personal mentors who doesn't work on my site here in Kansas. I believe he works at Kalamazoo, if I'm not mistaken. Kalamazoo or Rocky Mounts, one of those two. But he's an awesome man who's really focused on my success within Pfizer itself. So I'm very appreciative of Adrian Bailey. So I definitely want him on my board. And then last but most certainly not least, Evan Moss. So similar to Philip, another Apple mentor when I was in college, but still works at Apple to this day, and just super invested in my journey beyond Apple, just in my personal development and my growth. And so I had to have him on the board. And so those nine make up my ACE Peadbo board. And then, you asked the question about, what was that pivotal moment? So interestingly enough, let me give you this context. My objective of my board was that I wanted these nine amazing men, right, to help advise me how to become a safe, successful, and victorious servant leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
Literally, simply put. And the reason that was developed, I was really thinking about like what would the objective of my board be? What would be the through line that would be focused on? And I wanted something that my mentors can help me focus on the safety, success, and the victorious aspect and character of being a servant leader, because there's three different proverbs. I want to say it's Proverbs 11:14, Proverbs 15:22, and Proverbs 24:6 that say these three different things that you are able to receive, right? Safety, success, and
Mm-hmm.
victory after having a multitude of counsel. So I already knew counsel was beautiful, but having this beautiful counsel that
Mm-hmm.
is, anchors, challenges, and experts, safety, success, and victory is imminent for me. And the core of that is servant leadership. And that comes from Matthew 21:11, right? The greatest of these will be the least of these, essentially. Or for me, I wanted to make sure that my safety, success, and victory is used for stewardship as a servant leader, right? And the biggest part of that I knew this past season when I started Peadbo, when I say season, like again, March or around essentially from April to April 24 to 25, April 2024 to April 2025. This for me was the time where I knew that I wanted to, yes, develop as a young man, but also to prepare for marriage. And
Mm-hmm.
interestingly enough, this board, when you talk about pivotal moments, there was so many just gems of marital wisdom that came from these men, right? Whether they have families, whether they're married, whether they're engaged, even whether they the one that they left, right? Their God, right? Things of that nature. Like there's so much wisdom in every single one of their stories that actually set me up for success that I actually proposed to my current fiance a little over 2 weeks ago. And we're actually planning our wedding a year from now, right? But if it wasn't for that wisdom that
Oh
even occurred a
my God,
year ago, you know,
that's
they're like,
amazing.
Yinka, a couple of them, Torian and Arthur themselves. I remember this distinctly. They're like, Yinka, because I wanted to propose to my fiance's name is Carradine. Shout out Carradine. She's amazing. Met her in school, biomedical engineering major herself. We met in the same major. And she actually works at Pfizer here in Kansas. So
I
she's
love
killing the
that.
game. Shout out to her.
Shout out.
Something that Torian and Arthur both said to, and mind you, so yes, I have these group calls with my
Mm-hmm.
Peadbo mentors, but I also have one-on-ones with them, right? I text them, I call them. Arthur and Torian both said the same thing on two different calls. And they didn't know they were saying this. Maybe they did. I don't know what they're talking about in the background, right? Because as much as they helped me, I hopefully they're connecting with each other because they didn't
Yeah.
know each other previously to this. But they were like, Yinka, a year ago, they were saying this, Yinka, you want to propose to Carradine. But mind you, the Bible says, right, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and receives favor from the Lord. But the nuance to that, right, is that that man also shall be a husband, right? And so Carradine might be a wife, what you're explaining, but there's still areas that God is working through you and on
Mm.
you to cultivate the husband character in you that you're not ready yet. And that's, again, as a challenger like Arthur is and as an anchor
Wow.
that Tori is, I didn't want to hear that, but I needed to hear that. And there were so many things, whether, going through a forgiveness journey with my dad last year, paying
Mm.
off all my student loan debt, $34,000 student loan debt in one year,
Mm.
right? Growing closer to the Lord, right? Understanding what the Bible says, love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy, love does not boast, right? Love keeps no record of wrong. Like going through, and I'm not perfect, right? But going through every single one
Right.
of those, doing
Right.
devotionals on that, talking to my mentors continuously, doing pre-engagement counseling with Carradine. Like there were so many things I didn't even know, right? That kept me safe, that ended up in success, that ultimately will lead towards victory in marriage. That wisdom came from, and it was like, wow, I look back retrospect,
Mm.
that was that pivotal moment. That if I would have proposed a year ago, right, that there would be none of the fruit that we're currently experiencing that will set us up for again that victory in marriage about a year from now. So yeah, that would be the nine members, and then the pivotal moment centered around the objective, the safety, success, and victory.
Right. And I think, even though I introduced Peadbo as this, and I mentioned, I alluded to a little bit as this like professional development platform to help you sustain and maintain your mentorships. But I think, we try to silo our personal and professional lives, but all of it's interconnected. So you being able to express the fact that, although these folks help you with your career, they're also helping you in your personal journey and just trying to evolve as a better person for your community. When you're talking about servant leadership, like that's so important. And I think that's like your your perception and your perspective on this is amazing. And I want to like showcase like how important it is to have those authentic, genuine, raw conversations to be a better
Right.
person for your community and for your family. And so thank you for sharing that. And you're a great storyteller when it comes to this stuff. So
I appreciate
love
that.
hearing
Right,
a
yeah.
little bit more about what that looked like for you. Another question I have, since I'm sure you learned a lot from your nine mentors, because I mean, they sound by far amazing, and they're just dynamic in nature,
Yeah.
of the work that they do. So what advice would you give to someone looking to build their own personal advisory board?
Yeah.
Whether that's with nine members or just like three folks. Um,
Yeah. Good.
and yeah, so what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I mean, and you kind of touched on it, right? A couple seconds ago. For me personally, this is subjective advice, right? I knew that I went into this Peadbo, right, journey not necessarily wanting professional development, right? Because in my opinion, I believe all of the professional, right, growth and development really will flourish when the personal stuff's locked down, right? And I've experienced, and I've even heard of people's professional like, looking great and the personal is messed up. And then I would think about like, well, how sustainable is that?
Mhm,
And then they get further on, and then the professional starts to deteriorate because they never got the personal right, you know?
mhm,
And so for me, I wanted to really build this foundation so that the professional, right, will just bloom. And I'm seeing that, right? Like I said, I'm on a really good trajectory with Pfizer, and wherever God takes me, I'm open to that. And I still have these amazing mentors that eventually, if we want to do a professional center board, there's no question, right? I just knew with the season that I was in, I wanted something that was centered around marriage. And so, really, the advice I would give is, seeking members you can get close with, that you can go beyond the barrier of professionalism, right? Because I'll even speak about Arthur, like I said, attending his wedding, um, being the Paul to my Timothy, like really being a spiritual discipleship mentor, right? Like we went through a um a discipleship journey where like another guy was on this journey as well, and Arthur had us buy like a um, what's it called? A discipleship book where it was like a devotional that we had to do for
mhm,
multiple months, right? And it went so deep that it helped me understand even my faith, right, on a better level and what we're called to do, right, as Christians. And so there was just so many things that were able to be unraveled with all nine of these mentors because I already created a space that we were able to enter that was beyond professionalism, that was beyond work, that was beyond right the results at work and things of that nature. And so I would, okay, my opinion, my subjectivity would say, well, can you break the barrier beyond professionalism? So I believe true growth, right? True growth. When you clock out, or when you lay down in bed, right, you can rest easy knowing that, right,
mm,
yes, professionalism is doing well, but what's going on at home is also doing well, right? What's going on in your heart, what's going on in your mind is also doing well. Because I will say, and I mean, not that this is inherently, necessary, but for me, all my nine mentors are Black African American men, who, again, who are either, yes, killing it professionally, even though that's not what we talked about, but we're, killing it in the family life, who are killing it
Mhm.
in ministry, right? Who are killing it as fathers, right? Who are killing it as sons and brothers. And so I wanted to understand, what does that mean for me as a young Black man who plans to be a father, who plans to have a family, who plans to, right, and wants to continue to be an amazing son towards my parents, who continues to want to be amazing brother to my siblings and uncle to all my nieces and nephews. And so, and those are conversations in the Black community we don't talk about as much. But yes,
Mhm.
we'll talk about work, we'll talk about finances and all these different things. But it's like, let's
Surface
go
level.
deeper, surface
Yeah.
level, exactly. You see, and so for me, that's something I definitely want to talk about. And I will rather, right, give the advice is seek members you can get close with and get personal with, so the personal well-being things can be discussed in addition to the professional stuff, and not just the latter, not just the professional
Mhm.
stuff. Because that's where you're going to find real closeness and connection. And when watch this, and then we can move on to the next question. Is like, you mentioned surface level. If you only talk about the professional stuff and the Peadbo board, right, naturally comes to a natural end, well, then what, right? Like, are you just gonna like float away and not really have that
Right.
personal connection? Arthur
Right.
invited me to his wedding, right? And this is something, hopefully, right, we're able to cultivate this relation for the rest of our lives. And for all these nine guys, right? If I leave the job, right? If I decide to, switch industries, or is the connection with my mentors gonna shift now? Is something's gonna be different? But when you have a personal connection, hopefully the idea for me is that that's going to be a lifelong relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's like, yeah, I get it. Like sometimes people come and go, but at the same time, I feel like people has a bigger purpose than that. And like you gave wonderful examples on how that looks. These are lifelong friendships and
Right.
partnerships, and that's what Peadbo's for. It's not LinkedIn, it's not Facebook, it's not social
Right.
media. It's like you have to be vulnerable to be
Right.
able to like sustain and maintain those. And that's the space that we want to create for folks. And
Right.
I know we're at the hour here. But I do want to ask you before we go, and I
Sure.
honestly want you to come back again because I feel like there's other conversations we should be having more about like what it looks like to have more of a personal advisory for personal purposes. So like,
Mm-hmm, hmm.
but before you leave today, I want to know, like, I know you have nine folks already on your personal advisory board. I mean, that's
Sure.
that's a great amount. But
Mhm.
who else would you add to your personal advisory board, whether that's
It's a great
someone
question.
here, alive, or
Yeah,
dead? Who would you add to your personal advisory board?
it's a good question. And I'll try to keep it quick. Yes, and if I was to answer that one, it would be, I mean, I could go with the cliche answer. Not that it's cliche. I still love him to have my boy. Jesus, right? That'd be great. But then
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if anybody's
wouldn't that
answered
be
this one though.
awesome?
Right? That'd be awesome, right? Like that level of wisdom, crazy. But I think just as, I mean, not to say they're just the same because they are not, but biblical nonetheless, right? King Solomon, right? Again, you may or may not have gotten a response like that,
Yeah,
but I think
Solomon.
about that level of
Hmm.
wisdom where King Solomon was asked by God, right? What do you want? I'll give you whatever you want. And King Solomon instead responds with not money, not, all these different, fleeting things of the world, but he says wisdom, right? And
Hmm.
interestingly enough, God, yes, blessed him with the wisdom, which is the more important thing, but then blessed him with other things on top of that, right? The things he didn't ask for. And so I really think about how, wisdom is far more precious than rubies. Nothing else can
Hmm.
compare to her, right? Like wisdom is that thing that should be continuously sought after. And with good counsel, right, you will be a successful, victorious, and safe wisdom seeker. And so, yeah, definitely King Solomon, because I'd love to pick his mind when you talk about Proverbs, right? Like 31 different Proverbs of just
Hmm.
straight game. So having King
Right.
Solomon, just hearing him speak to different aspects of my life would be very interesting.
Yeah, and drop those nuggets.
Come
Like
on.
he always had something good to say.
Yeah,
Thank you, Yinka, for being with us today.
of course.
Yeah, I definitely will reach out to you again because I feel like there's so much to unpack with some of the stories, and I feel like you have wisdom to share with others. And this has been really great. For others, like and subscribe and get connected with us and learn more about Peebo. And hopefully you'll soon see Yinka back here again. And have a great
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.